What separates a life of average struggle from a life of divine distinction? It is not destiny. It is not luck. It is the mastery of a single, silent power, the power to act as if nothing affects you. This posture is not arrogance. It is the ultimate expression of faith. It is the key that unlocks prosperity, even when the world is burning around you. If you are ready to move beyond praying for miracles and begin commanding them, listen closely. For the next hour, we will delve into the forbidden history of the Babylonian Empire, unveiling the code that transformed 3 slaves into the most powerful financiers on earth. The year is 597 BC. The setting is Babylon, a city not just of bricks and mortar, but a financial and military juggernaut built on total conformity. Under the tyrannical vision of King Nebuchadnezzar, the city was the center of the known universe, but its law was simple: you obey, or you perish. The king, driven by an insatiable hunger for glory, constructs the ultimate monument to himself, a colossal golden image, 90 feet high, shining a narcissistic defiance across the plain of Dura. This was more than an idol. It was the physical manifestation of fear and financial control. Nebuchadnezzar issued an undeniable command, enforced by the full weight of his military machine. When the horn sounds, every official, every citizen, every subject must bow down and worship. The penalty for refusal was immediate, final, and spectacular: the blazing fiery furnace. It was a punishment designed not merely to kill, but to terrify the soul, a heat so intense, so consuming, that it was meant to erase every memory of the dissenter. The furnace was heated 7 times hotter than usual, a literal overkill, signaling the absolute zero-tolerance policy for disobedience. This was the ultimate test. It was the moment that defined who would remain a slave to fear, and who would rise to become a master of their own reality. In the face of this overwhelming pressure, most would crumble. Most would bow. Most would rationalize their fear, whispering, "It's just a gesture, I'll pray later." This is the core problem for every person who struggles with money, with purpose, with relationships: the surrender of mental authority. The world constantly pushes you to react, to panic, to explode, to play the victim. Every time you engage in meaningless arguments, every time you let a financial setback steal your sleep, every time you allow the opinion of a critic to derail your purpose, you are bowing down to the enemy of chaos. The Bible calls this lack of control doubt. We call it mental slavery. Before you can conquer wealth, you must conquer the space between your ears. Napoleon Hill, in his study of successful men, called this necessary discipline mental authority, insisting that all riches begin with the single dominant idea. Your biggest enemy is not the market crash. It is the undisciplined mind that quits before the reward arrives. You do not control the economy, the critics, or the weather, but you possess the supreme power to choose how you will respond to them. And that choice, made in silence, determines whether you remain bound to struggle or whether you ascend to the top tier of unshakable prosperity. Against the backdrop of Babylonian fear, 3 exiles, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, made the choice that separated them forever from the bowing masses. They were highly successful administrators, men of influence, but their ultimate loyalty lay with an invisible God. They refused to bend. When dragged before the king, they did not plead. They did not beg for an exemption. They demonstrated a composure that stunned the entire court, a stillness that was more intimidating than the king's own rage. Their famous response is the foundational text for the unshakable posture. We do not need to defend ourselves before you concerning this matter. This single sentence is the divine key. It is the absolute refusal to enter into the king's emotional drama. They were saying, "Your problem is not my problem. Your rage does not define my reality." They recognized that arguing was a trap, a way to surrender their mental peace. They were physically present in the king's court, but their minds remained in the presence of God. This is the secret of the masters. You must learn to live in the spiritual reality where your success is already guaranteed, treating the physical reality, the threat, the debt, the criticism, as a temporary illusion. This posture forces the universe to change the circumstances to match your internal conviction. Lesson 1. The power of silent refusal. The first law of unshakable prosperity is the law of silent refusal. The moment Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego told King Nebuchadnezzar, "We do not need to defend ourselves," they activated this law. It is the discipline of knowing that your purpose is so massive, your calling so divine, that you have no time to address every petty distraction, every minor critique, or every temporary financial slump. The noise trap and mental fatigue. Think about how much energy the average person wastes every day. They are constantly reacting to the news, to office gossip, to a meaningless comment on social media, to the fear projected by their environment. This is the noise trap. It is designed to exhaust your mental capital, leaving you too drained to focus on the long-term, high-leverage activities that build wealth. The silent refusal is the spiritual wall you build around your mind. It means seeing the criticism, acknowledging the fear, but consciously choosing not to engage. You do not need to prove your worth to your family, your neighbors, or your competitors. Your work is your testimony. Your results are your justification. The Stoic and the Sovereign. This biblical posture is mirrored by the ancient philosophy of Stoicism, adopted by emperors and generals who understood that the only thing they controlled was their judgment and their response. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus taught, "Control what you can control, and let go of what you cannot." The three Hebrews demonstrated the ultimate Stoic principle. They could not control the king's decree or the heat of the furnace, but they could absolutely control their internal response. They chose to remain sovereigns of their own minds, even as their bodies were dragged toward the flames. For you, the modern entrepreneur, the modern visionary, this means that every time you feel the urge to lash out, to overshare your plan, or to panic over a market swing, you must apply the law of silent refusal. Stop talking and start working. Stop justifying and start winning. This posture conserves the energy required to execute your divine plan. The application to modern wealth. How does this relate to your bank account? Wealth is attracted to calm, not chaos. Investors trust leaders who remain tranquil during a crisis. Opportunities flow to individuals who are not distracted by noise. If you are constantly reacting to small-stakes drama, you are broadcasting a signal of instability. The law of silent refusal forces you to put a premium on your peace. You walk with a certainty that makes people pause. They ask, "Why isn't he worried? Why isn't she panicking?" Your non-reaction becomes your silent magnetic force, drawing respect, confidence, and, ultimately, financial opportunity. Your silence in the face of provocation is the most powerful sermon you will ever preach, proving that the divine key, your faith, is stronger than the king's entire army. Lesson 2. The manifestation of certainty. The next law of the unshakable posture is the manifestation of certainty. When Nebuchadnezzar, in his escalating rage, offered a final chance, the three men dropped the most powerful line in the entire narrative. "But even if he does not deliver us, we want you to know, Your Majesty, that we will not serve your gods." This statement is the ultimate financial and spiritual hedge. It is the declaration of a mind that has already processed the worst-case scenario and determined that its purpose is more valuable than its physical survival. This is not reckless abandon, it is radical conviction. The core truth here is this. Faith is the certainty that your desired future is already guaranteed, regardless of present facts. Most people pray for certainty. The sovereign manifests certainty through their behavior. The lie of waiting. The average person waits for the financial market to stabilize before they invest. They wait for validation before they launch their business. They wait for the debt to clear before they feel prosperous. This is the lie of waiting. You are delaying your success until the evidence is foolproof. But if the evidence is foolproof, faith is no longer required, and neither is the spectacular reward. The three Hebrews were standing on the evidence of God's character, not on the evidence of their circumstances. The furnace was proof of danger. Their posture was proof of divine alliance. Certainty as currency. In the economy of God, certainty is currency. When you act from a position of absolute conviction, you become a magnet for opportunity. Think of the modern entrepreneur who raises capital not because their product is perfect, but because their belief in the vision is infectious and non-negotiable. They walk into a room and command investment simply because they are certain of the outcome. That certainty stems from an inner commitment, that transcends the visible balance sheet. For your financial life, this means adopting a long-term perspective, a perspective of generational wealth. The application to investment. How do you apply this to investment? It means viewing market corrections not as a reason to panic, but as a temporary dip in the execution of a long-term, divinely inspired strategy. When you invest in your skills, your business, or your assets, you do so with the assurance that the seed planted will yield a harvest. The fear of failure is simply the king's music asking you to bow. The manifestation of certainty is refusing to even acknowledge the music, because your mind is already hearing the sound of your promotion. This posture forces the universe and your business to operate under the law of abundance, because you have mentally rejected the jurisdiction of scarcity. You act like the millionaire you will be, not the person who is struggling to pay bills. That subtle shift in behavior and decision-making is the divine key. Lesson 3. The Code of Separation. The third law of prosperity is the Code of Separation. When Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego stood firm, they separated themselves not only from the king but from the thousands of Jewish exiles who did bow. This act of distinction is the cost of entry into the highest levels of success. True wealth is not a mass-market commodity. It is a rare reward reserved for the distinctly resolute. The fear of distinction. Why do most people remain financially stunted? Because they are terrified of being different. They are afraid of the isolation that comes with a vision that others cannot understand. They fear the criticism of their peer group. But success requires you to step onto the narrow path. Your refusal to cut corners, your commitment to delivering genuine value, your dedication to long-term discipline when others are seeking instant gratification. This is your code of separation. Integrity is leverage. The reason Nebuchadnezzar ultimately promoted them to higher office after the miracle was not just because of the miracle, but because of the integrity proven in the fire. The king realized, men who will not bow to the divine will certainly not steal from the human. Uncommon integrity becomes your greatest professional leverage. It is the invisible quality that powerful people seek in partners and leaders. If your life demonstrates that you are willing to face death, the ultimate risk, rather than compromise, you prove you are worthy of trust, worthiness, and absolute authority. The application to business and leadership. For your business, this means your brand must embody this refusal to bow. It must stand for something so distinct, so valuable, that it becomes an object of respect, even by competitors. Stop following the trends that everyone else is chasing. Find the principle, the product, or the purpose that reflects your uncommon integrity, and then build your empire around that rock-solid foundation. Separation means saying no to good opportunities, so you can be ready to say yes to the great, divinely ordained opportunity. It means choosing the hard, disciplined work of silence over the easy, distracting noise of public validation. Your prosperity will not be found where the crowds are. It will be found on the high ground where only the resolute can breathe. The price of the pit. We must look further into this concept of separation, past the furnace, to a man whose destiny was forged in the pits of neglect. Joseph. Joseph was betrayed by his own family. He was thrown into a cistern, an empty, cold, dark hole. The cistern was his first great separation. His brothers intended it for death. God intended it for isolation and preparation. Every visionary, every great entrepreneur, goes through a period of isolation, the cistern phase. This is the time when your vision is mocked, your efforts are unseen, and your progress is invisible. This period is a test of your separation. Will you allow bitterness to consume you in the pit, or will you use the silence to sharpen your skills and solidify your conviction? Joseph chose the latter. His separation was not passive. It was an active refinement of his inner character. Lesson 4. The Mastery of the Low Place. The fourth law is the mastery of the low place. When Joseph was falsely accused by Potiphar's wife and thrown into a dungeon, he entered a second, deeper phase of separation. This was a place of total injustice, a black hole where dreams go to die. Yet, Joseph's posture did not change. He did not curse God or descend into self-pity. He applied the unshakable posture we saw in the furnace. The prison is a promotion laboratory. In the deepest, darkest point of his life, the prison, Joseph acted as if he was still the ruler of Egypt. He applied his skills in management, organization, and counseling with such integrity that the jailer immediately put him in charge of all the prisoners. The prison became Joseph's promotion laboratory. He didn't need the title, the uniform, or the praise. He simply was a leader. He simply was an administrator. This is the truth. Your current title and your current environment do not define your core character. The application to financial struggle. If you are currently struggling financially, working a job you hate, or feeling overlooked, you must adopt Joseph's posture. Act as if the promotion has already been announced. If you treat your current low-paying job with indifference, you prove you are unworthy of the high-paying one. If you treat your small savings with carelessness, you prove you are unworthy of great wealth. The universe and God promote based on stewardship. Your ability to manage and master the low place proves your readiness for the high place. Joseph was not promoted out of the prison until he had mastered the prison. He had to demonstrate that the chains did not restrict his mental authority. This posture, the unshakable discipline in the absence of reward, is the true mark of the predestined master. The silence of preparation. Joseph's decade-long journey, from pit to prison, was a period of deep, necessary silence. The divine key requires silence. You cannot hear the instructions of your destiny over the noise of complaint, self-doubt, or external distraction. In the silence of the low place, Joseph honed the financial and administrative skills that would be necessary to save the known world from famine. He transformed a place of suffering into a training ground for global leadership. Your current struggle is not a punishment. It is a private training phase for the massive prosperity that requires an unshakable mind. Lesson 5. The discipline of patience. The fifth law of unshakable success is the discipline of patience, which is not idleness, but rather execution in silence. Joseph spent 2 additional years in prison after interpreting the cupbearer's dream, the man who promised to intercede for him, but forgot. 2 years of silence, of crushing disappointment, of waiting, after a brief glimpse of hope. This is the point where 99% of people quit. It is the valley of frustration where the divine promise appears to have been revoked. The skeptic would say Joseph failed. The unshakable master knows this was the final test of his posture. Patience is a financial asset. Impatience is the greatest financial saboteur. It leads to impulsive high-risk investments, to quitting a profitable business before it scales, and to seeking shortcuts that lead to disaster. The discipline of patience is the ability to continue executing with excellence even when God's timeline does not align with your own. Joseph continued managing the prison with the same diligence. He honored the invisible work. He understood that the seed of his authority was being nourished by time, not by applause. The cycle of disappointment. Every great vision of success goes through an inevitable cycle of deep disappointment. You plant, you work tirelessly, and the initial result is absent. Criticism mounts, the bill is due, and doubt sets in. The world wants you to react to this pain, either by lashing out or self-pity. But the discipline of patience requires you to return to your post and continue the work. The silence after the cupbearer's broken promise was Joseph's ultimate proving ground, demonstrating he could maintain his certainty and composure even in the face of betrayal and neglect. Wealth flows to those who prove they can wait for the harvest, because persistence is the only channel that links the promise to its physical manifestation. The paradox of time. Why did Joseph have to wait 2 extra years? Because he was not being trained to be just an administrator. He was being prepared to be the financial savior of the world. When he was finally called, he needed to be the right age and possess the right maturity. But crucially, Egypt also needed to be at the precise moment for his calling. Joseph's patience aligned his internal clock with God's prophetic timing. You must operate with this same understanding. Your waiting is God's time to prepare the scale of your blessing. Lesson 6. The power of interpretation. The 6th law of unshakable success is the power of interpretation. When Pharaoh had his disturbing dreams, the fat and thin cows, the full and empty heads of grain, he didn't just need a fortune teller. He needed a crisis decoder. What moved Joseph from the prison to the second highest throne in Egypt in a single day? It was not his innocence, but his capacity to interpret the future and propose a management solution. Crisis is language. The world is constantly speaking to you through crises. negative feedback at work, a market correction, a health scare. Most people react to the symptom, the fear, the loss, and never decode the message, the need to change strategy, the gap for a new product, the failure in the system. The power of interpretation is the master's tool that transforms chaos into capital. Application to risk management and innovation. For you, as an empire builder, this means every failure is a coded message. If a business fails, it is not an end. It is an interpretation of a faulty business model. If the market dips, it is the interpretation of the need for diversification and investment in recession-proof assets. Joseph did not just predict the 7-year famine. He proposed the only risk management and logistical solution that would save Egypt. Wealth was handed to him because he proved to be the only one capable of decoding the future and creating a plan of action. The interpretation of posture. Pharaoh saw Joseph's unshakable posture. He saw a man who, despite coming from a prison, spoke with the authority of a king. This authority did not come from the throne he was offered, but from the certainty he manifested while in the cell. Pharaoh understood that a man who can maintain his composure and mental clarity in a dungeon is the only man who can remain calm when famine strikes the entire known world. Joseph's power was his uninterrupted vision of the divine plan. You must cultivate this same power. Your crisis is not an obstacle. It is the language of your next level of success. Lesson 7. The climax of the furnace. The seventh and final law is the activation of the fourth man. We return to the climax in Babylon. The furnace is heated 7 times hotter. The soldiers who threw Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego die from the intensity of the heat. The fire is real, the threat is absolute. And what happens? The test of the king's gaze. Nebuchadnezzar, the epitome of earthly power, witnesses the impossible. He rises hastily and shouts to his counselors, "Did we not throw 3 men bound into the fire? Look, I see 4 men, unbound, walking in the midst of the fire, and they are not hurt. And the appearance of the 4th is like a son of the gods." This is the guarantee of your posture. When you act with the absolute certainty of Lesson 2, when your integrity reflects Lesson 3, and when you master your circumstance, like in Lesson 4, the Joseph Project, you activate an unbreakable divine alliance. The fire does not go out, the problem does not disappear, but the crisis's power to consume you is neutralized by the presence of the divine. Financial immunity. The furnace represents financial crisis, bankruptcy, debt, lawsuits. Most entrepreneurs are consumed by crisis, but you, the unshakable one, are called to walk in its midst. Your financial immunity is not the absence of problems. It is your capacity to persist with composure while the problems are active. The fire destroys the ropes, the things that bound them, fear, doubt, limiting beliefs, but it does not touch your purpose. The call to wealth. Your next level of wealth demands that you walk through the fire. Do not try to detour. Do not try to negotiate. Act as if nothing affects your destiny, because you are walking with the certainty of one who has already activated the 4th man. Your discipline, your integrity, and your patience are the irrefutable proofs that you are worthy of the scale of prosperity God has reserved for those who will not bow. The strategic mind, deepening the Joseph blueprint. We must now analyze the final, critical layer of Joseph's unshakable posture, the layer that secured his position for the rest of his life and ensured generational wealth for his entire family. This goes beyond managing a prison. It is the divine strategy for permanent authority. The principle of the system builder. Joseph's promotion was not merely a reward. It was a transfer of systemic authority. When Pharaoh saw Joseph's interpretation and system proposal, he realized he was looking at the only man capable of turning a warning into a profitable operation. Joseph did not just survive the famine. He used the 7 years of plenty to create the world's first successful centralized commodity management system. He created systemic prosperity where chaos was predicted. The unshakable leader does not just fix immediate problems. They build systems that prevent the problems from recurring. For your business, this means moving away from constantly putting out fires and dedicating your time to creating processes, automation, and clear management hierarchies that operate effectively, even in your absence. This focus on system building, proven during the low place of his imprisonment, is the true mark of a leader ready for multi-generational wealth. Wealth sustains itself through robust, well-managed systems, systems that Joseph forged in the silence of his disciplined waiting. The power of systemic stewardship. Joseph's system taught the world the financial discipline of stewardship. He collected 20% of the harvest during the years of plenty and stored it in massive, central granaries. He was teaching a nation, and later the entire region, the wisdom of delayed gratification and strategic saving. His posture proved that he could manage the low place, the prison, and his actions proved he could manage the high place, the treasury. True prosperity requires discipline in the high places, the periods of abundance, just as much as courage in the low places. Many people receive a windfall and immediately treat it as a temporary pleasure, violating the law of stewardship. Joseph treated the abundance as a sacred responsibility, leading to a financial position so dominant that people came from all nations to buy food from him. This is the divine key to monopoly. Solve a global problem with divine foresight and impeccable execution, and you command the market. Your unshakable posture must extend to your financial systems, treating every dollar not as disposable income, but as a seed for future systemic growth. The final test of forgiveness. We cannot end the Joseph blueprint without addressing the ultimate mental challenge, forgiveness. When his brothers came, bowing to him in Egypt, Joseph had the absolute power to crush them. The average person, consumed by past trauma and the thirst for revenge, would have done exactly that. But Joseph, the master of his inner world, did not allow past injustice to corrupt his present authority. He understood that bitterness is a chain that binds the prisoner, even after they have been released. Forgiveness is the final act of mental liberation. By choosing to forgive, Joseph demonstrated that his posture was truly unshakable, not dependent on justice or apology, but rooted in the knowledge that his betrayal was simply a catalyst for his promotion. Bitterness is a tax on your future success. The truly wealthy mind cuts this cost instantly, realizing that past wrongs are merely plot points in the grand narrative of their divine ascent. Final charge, the legacy of the unburnt. We have charted the course of the unshakable through 7 profound laws, moving from the furnace of Babylon to the financial empire of Egypt. You have learned that the unshakable posture is the refusal to surrender your mental authority to circumstances that are beneath your divine calling. The 7 laws of the divine key. The silent refusal. Conserve your mental energy. Never explain your vision to critics or noise. The manifestation of certainty. Act as if the wealth is guaranteed, because your faith is your highest form of financial leverage. The code of separation. Choose uncommon integrity over common compromise. Distinction is the currency of true power. The mastery of the low place. Prove your stewardship in the pit or the prison. Character is forged in the invisible silence. The discipline of patience. Continue executing with excellence, knowing that time is preparing the massive scale of your blessing. The power of interpretation. Decode every crisis not as a setback, but as the strategic language of your next level of action. The activation of the 4th man. Maintain your composure in the fire to guarantee the divine alliance and the promotion that follows. The unshakable challenge. The world is constantly challenging you to surrender your inner control, to bow down to fear, doubt, and emotional chaos. Every time you react impulsively, you are submitting to the noise. Every time you quit, you are confirming the king's authority over your destiny. But you are no longer that person. The person who was easily rattled, who constantly sought approval, who needed to explain every decision. That version of you has been consumed by the fire. Today, you are armed with the divine key, the unshakable posture of a sovereign. Your command is your reality. Your journey now requires disciplined action. Refuse to waste your mental capital on critics who are still bowing to their own fears. Act with the certainty that your long-term success is already sealed. Embrace the silence of your preparation, knowing that the greatest empires are built in the dark, without applause. Welcome the fire, because it is the fastest, most effective way to be promoted to your next level of wealth and authority. When people see your calm in the storm, they will call you cold, unfeeling, or maybe even arrogant. Let them. Your composure is not a sign of absence of emotion. It is a sign of mastery over it. It is the absolute evidence that your vision is bigger than their judgment. You are walking with the fourth man, and the only evidence that matters is your results, the lack of the smell of smoke on your purpose. Remember Joseph. He acted as a master in the prison. Remember the 3 Hebrews. They acted as sovereigns in the furnace. Your external condition is temporary. Your internal posture is eternal. Command your mind, and your world will follow. The world belongs to those who do not despair, who observe before acting, and who, even with fire in their veins, respond with the cold, deliberate clarity of a general. If you dominate your interior, your exterior is already won. You do not need to prove anything anymore, because your discipline shines, your focus inspires, and your silence commands respect. Now, breathe deeply, look around, and accept the truth. You are the living proof that when you are silent in your resolve, the world has no choice but to listen. If this message has deeply resonated with you, if it has armed you with the code to transform your struggle into an undeniable promotion, then you know we are fulfilling the purpose of the divine key. If you feel that this video has already helped you this far and you want to deepen your knowledge, improve your financial life, and receive the daily principles that activate true, lasting prosperity, then click subscribe and like this video. Doing so ensures this vital message reaches more people who, just like you, are awakening to the power of their unshakable, divinely appointed life. Now, answer this in the comments below. What is the next immediate, non-negotiable step you will take this week to demonstrate the certainty that your promotion has already been decreed? See you in the next video.